Good evening. I'd like to open the Monday, August 16th, 2021 Union County Board of Commissioners regular meeting. As usual, we begin our meeting with our invocation, and Commissioner Rushing, if you'll lead us, please.
Join me if you'd like. Dear Heavenly Father, we pray that you'll be with us tonight as we make the decisions for the citizens of Union County, and be in special prayer for the people of Afghanistan as they are facing a terror that we don't even understand. Pray that you'd be with our troops that are going to be sent into the area. Pray that you would be with the families, the women and the children of Afghanistan. Pray that you would be mindful, and hopefully that these people will come to some kind of conclusion that would be pleasing. In your name we pray, amen.
Same for our invocation.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
As usual, we look forward to recognize our employees and their contribution they have made to Union County. And we would start with 5 years. And first is Megan Garcia with 911 Communications. Yemi Gomez with HS Business Ops. Natasha Melton with HS Business Ops. And Jennifer Antonucci with the Sheriff's Office. With also Regina Griffin with the Sheriff's Office. Kyle Randall, Sheriff's Office. Nelson Woods with the Sheriff's Office. Alan Aldridge with the Soil Conservation, and Christopher Mokusa with the Tax Administration. With 10 years, there is Tawanda Young with Communication Support and Outreach. Amanda Austin with Finance. Migdala Morales with Public Works. Jennifer Corbett with Public Works. Marisol Mullis with Public Works. And with 15 years, there's Shannon Davis with HS Business Ops. Sherry McNeil with the Library. Brian Funnebert with the Sheriff's Office. And with August, we had August retirements of Carrie Redmond with the Sheriff's Office. We do extend our appreciation for the service that these individuals have provided for Union County. Next, we have informal comments. And first, we have Shannon Bowling.
Good evening, Chairman Helms and other distinguished members of council. My name is Shannon Bowling. I live at 3009 Blickling Drive, Waxhaw, North Carolina. Some of you recognize me as the local land manager for David Weekley Homes. I want to speak briefly tonight about the sewer capacity situation that we're dealing with in Union County. And first and foremost, I want to thank you all for your time in this. I want to thank staff. I want to thank Union County Public Works. They've been nothing but professional, meeting with my team, myself, sharing information, and we really appreciate that. I know it's not an easy job, so thank you for that. In January, we found out that there would be a problem with our sewer capacity in the area, and immediately you guys got to work with Union County Public Works in figuring out a long-term solution, and that resulted in the vote to expand 12 Mile Creek, and we appreciate that. That's going to open up capacity for future projects. However, that's a long-term solution, and in the short term, we feel like the projects that are in the engineering queue, there's still some work to be done, and there's some ideas out there that we would like to keep exploring with you guys. First is the cap removal. It appears that if nothing else is done and the cap is removed today, that there could be some capacity available. Staff has shared with us recently that there was that they were at 98% at 12 Mile, And if that was removed, I think staff has also shared that they would not go above 99% because they wouldn't go over that limit, but that, that frees up 1%. Every 1% is 75,000 gallons. And I would like to respectfully request the board to remove the cap. This would free up capacity for not only other projects on the list, but also a project that my firm owns in the area. Other ideas that I would like to mention is on the permitted obligation list. We had a chance to review that briefly this morning. Appears that there may be some inconsistencies on existing projects and how much is left. It looks like some of those projects may be built out, and I just looked at the residential portion of that, and I'd be glad to volunteer my time and effort. I'm not a commercial broker, so I'd have to enlist somebody else for help on the commercial side, but I think an in-depth review of that might free up additional capacity. Also, the pump over for 6 Mile, I understand that the pipes are being refurbished now to help with that pump over. But once that's done, just like to understand what Public Works policy is going to be as far as how much could be used there. I think that could help out a little bit as well. And last but not least, I would like to say thank you guys for your time, and appreciate everything you do for Union County, and we'd like to ask you guys one more time to remove the 95% cap. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next, we have Theresa Claussen.
I come to request, I would like to get water in my little town of Unionville. I've been a resident here, built my house in '83, and I
Can
was
we have your name and where you live, please?
4117 Sykes Mill Road, Monroe, North Carolina, down about a mile from Piedmont High School.
Okay.
We have bad water on our road, and we have it going on every direction road except my road. And we'd like to respectfully request someone to look into us being able to get some county water, because we have bad water. It's really bad. And so I tried to apply, but they're not taking any applicants. They're not doing it online. I was told when I built my house in '83, I'd have county water in '93, and I've been patiently waiting for county water. And we have a real need on our road to get county water. And I would like to see if there's funds available that we could get on the short-term project to get county water.
Okay, thank you. I think if you'll stay around for item 42, you might get some of your answers.
Okay.
Okay. Karen Greens. Your name and address, please, ma'am?
My name is Karen Green. I live at 2118 Clonslong Road, Monroe, North Carolina, known as the town of in-between. One side of the road is Fairview, one side of the road is Unionville. I'm also coming to speak about water. Lived there all my life. It's 1 mile from me, from 218. It's about 2 miles from Clonslong Road in the other direction, and then a couple miles down the road in the other direction from Piedmont High School. Our water is very bad. Can't even buy white clothing. My appliances, bathroom fixtures and everything are awful. Haven't lived there in my home that I built but 20-something years, but I've already had to replace 2 water tanks because of the quality of water that I have from my well. I didn't know I would be able to speak, but I would like, and I know that some of have heard our cries for help, and we would just like to be considered. It's all around us, and I know that one place close to us was bumped up because of a chicken farm, and I would think that human life is more important than just those chickens, and we would like to have some good quality water out our way. Thank you very much for your time and what you do for us.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Next is Shannon, is it Batting? At 3009 Blickling Drive. Oh, okay. All right, well, that'll conclude our informal comments. Next, we have our additions, deletions, and/or adoption to the agenda. And I'd like to start off by pulling item number 4 per staff request. Any other additions, deletions? Okay. All right, we have a motion. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. All opposed? None. Next, we have the consent agenda. Motion to approve as amended. Okay. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Okay. Our next is our old business is the Union County 2050 Comprehensive Plan adoption. Appreciate it, Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is the culmination of almost 2 years of work that has been done by about a little over 60 individuals that have been spread out over multiple committees that helped to put this plan together, and also the Union County Planning Board that considered this plan and also provided a recommendation to you. Back in June, the board held a public hearing. You heard some comments from some various individuals regarding the plan. And tonight, what I'm going to do is we'll talk about the vision of the coordinating, the committees adopted, and then how those, and the strategies that help implement that vision. And what I'm going to do, hopefully fairly briefly, is go through the land use plan and then go through each strategy one by one, just to kind of reiterate what those strategies are, and then have the board take a look at each strategy and decide whether to include that in the plan or not. So this is the vision that the coordinating committee ultimately came up with. It was voted on by the planning board, and this is incorporated. This was a unified recommendation. And it says Union County in 2050 is a place defined by connections where local governments work together on targeted issues. There are clearly communicated plans for growth and infrastructure improvements, and resources are committed to their implementation. Union County is a growing community where there is increased capacity to address education, transportation, water, public safety, and other multi-jurisdictional issues. High-density residential, retail, and employment options in designated areas. Convenient accessibility between retail, residential, and employment land uses. Complementary development patterns along corridors. Preserve the rural character outside of water and sewer coverage areas. Recognition and support of agriculture as a key industry, and enhance community connections for arts, agritourism, and parks and recreation. So the next few slides, again, talk about the current land, or the proposed land use plan. And I'm going to talk about some differences between what's being proposed and what we currently have as our land use plan, and then I'll go into the strategies. But always remember that the new land use plan and those strategies are there to help implement this recommended vision. So the existing land use plan is what you see on your screen before you. So this is what we use today. If a rezoning request were to come before you, or a special use permit went to the Board of Adjustment. So these are to make future land use decisions. The green area, again, that's your agricultural, very low density areas. Yellows on this map are single family residential. The kind of orange area is the mixed residential, and that tends to be the higher density residential, places where you might see apartments or condos or townhomes or patio home type communities, more than 2 units per acre. And then you have some various levels of commercial development. So you have rural centers, neighborhood centers, and large and small commercial centers. And then you also have the employment corridors, which lie along 601, Highway 75, and Highway 74. And that allows various types of employment type land uses, industrial type land uses along those corridors. This is the recommended plan. You see a lot more green on this map than as the previous plan showed. That was in recognition of the coordinating committee saying we need to really concentrate some of those higher density land uses in certain areas and not spread them across the whole county. We need to keep the county, especially a lot of the unincorporated areas where there is no water and sewer, keep it rural. There was some recognition that some of these areas where there was mixed residential, they should be classified as single family because there's a recognition that there is water and or sewer in those areas, but it's not necessarily conducive to high density land uses. The commercial and industrial areas really didn't change that much. In fact, these employment corridors have been on some type of plan since the late 60s. And the coordinating committee looked at that and said that they thought that was still a good idea. They liked that. They liked the idea of putting industrial land uses along those high transportation corridors. So some of the primary differences, again, the high density residential. On the existing plan, you have over 25,000 acres dedicated to mixed residential. This cut it back to around 1,000 acres, so about a 95% reduction in area. So really targeted areas of higher density, but it really cut it back so it's not spread across the whole county. The existing plan made land use recommendations for all unincorporated areas. The proposed, we have those transition zones that we've talked about from time to time that in those donut hole areas of the county, it really, you would not approve upzonings in those areas. You would basically tell the developer that they probably wouldn't need to go talk to a town about possible annexation. Preserving rural character. In the current comprehensive plan, there are agricultural areas that are identified for low density, but they're not as vast as what they are in the proposed plan. So in the proposed plan, we've reduced the single-family residential and mixed residential areas, expanded that rural area. It does allow clustering if utilities are present, but it doesn't give you any more density. There are some open space requirements for major subdivisions in those rural areas. And then really, again, the industrial land uses, especially along those employment corridors, there's really no change. The coordinating committee looked at that and said they wanted to keep those. So those are really the primary differences between the current land use plan and the recommended land use plan. So again, after each strategy, what I'd ask the board to do is look at this and make a motion to either incorporate the new land use plan or the new strategy into the 2050 plan or not. So at this point, I'll stop because we're going to get into the strategies next. This is a land use plan, so I'll ask if the board would consider incorporating this by a motion and a vote into the 2050 plan.
Commissioner Simpson.
Lee, can you elaborate on the, I believe it's showing difference in color on the two plans, rural residential versus single-family residential?
Yes. So the rural residential are the rural areas as shown on this plan. These are these green areas, and that is the lowest density residential land uses that could be allowed. Generally, those are going to be less than 1 unit per acre. The single-family residential areas, some of those areas have water and sewer, some don't. So it's recognized that in areas that don't have water and sewer, you're probably looking at land uses of around 1 unit per acre. In areas where there may be water and sewer, you could potentially get up to 2 units per acre. And then I'm glad you said that, because I forgot to touch on one thing. I mentioned it when I was talking about it, but these kind of hashed areas that are green, that I'm kind of circling around right now, those are those transition zones that I was talking about. So they're incorporated in this land use map.
I guess my question is, do we need a motion to accept or reject the increased open space requirement for rural areas? Is that one of them you're wanting to just talk to?
Not right now. This
Okay.
is just for this. This is just for the
Just for
land use
this
plan.
one,
Yes,
okay.
sir. Yes, sir. We'll get into all those strategies in just a minute.
Okay. Well, I'll make a motion to accept the current land use map,
The current or the recommended?
the recommended.
Okay.
Any discussion? Commissioner Rushing, I'm sorry.
And Lee, the gray area on this map, that's municipalities.
Yes, sir.
So just really interesting to see how much,
Yes.
again, the impact they will have on their decisions and what they do. So the green, the yellow, the purple, a little bit of red, a little bit of light green, that's us. The rest is municipalities.
Yes, sir. I'm glad you pointed that out. That was in recognition that the towns, they are in charge of making their own land use decisions.
Commissioner Simpson.
Lee, is to vote in favor of the recommended land use map, has this been vetted with all the planning and zoning current ordinances, et cetera, to see that there are no major conflicts or it's congruent with that change?
We wouldn't change any zoning districts based on this. All the zoning districts would stay the same. Some of the strategies that you're going to see in a few minutes, there probably would be some text amendments to the ordinance that would come back. But yes, we've looked at that, and there would be no zoning changes that would come forward based on this, unless that was something that the board decided they wanted to do.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
So what I'm going to do next is run through each strategy and kind of use that same format. I'll briefly describe what that strategy is, the consistency with the vision, and then briefly discuss some of the public comment, and then what the planning board and coordinating committee did on these. So the first one is establishing a litter task force. This strategy would help provide increased capacity to address public safety and other multi-jurisdictional issues. So litter doesn't just stop at somebody throws a bag out of the window, it could blow down the road. It doesn't just stop at a jurisdictional line. Plus, when people drive through the county and see litter, they don't necessarily know what town they're in. They know they're in Union County. 94% of the public, when the draft plan went out for review, was either somewhat or fully in support of that recommendation. All 5 subcommittees strongly supported it. The coordinating committee was unanimous, and so was the planning board. And what this task force would do, this would not bind the county to any type of decision. This would be a task force that would be put together to come up with strategies to address litter issues in Union County, and they would then come back to you with those strategies and recommendations.
Okay. Well, I'll make a motion to accept establishing a litter task force to help clean up some of our roads in Union County, okay? Any discussion? All in favor? Okay.
All right. The next one is updating stormwater standards. The committees heard a lot about stormwater during a lot of their background research, and decided that it would be a good thing if the county updated their land use regulations to increase stormwater standards. You can see this doesn't really have, it doesn't say what that standard is going to be. That's because this is really a policy guide to sort of set that in motion. What would happen is if this was incorporated, there would be a committee put together to look at those stormwater standards, what those stormwater standards should be. This is in no way, the committee did say that they did not want the county to get into the business of owning or operating a stormwater system, so we don't want to own any infrastructure or maintain any infrastructure. This is really about just increased standards in the ordinance. This was supported. You can see 94% of the public either somewhat or fully supported it. All 5 subcommittees supported it. 4 were unanimous. 1 had 83% in favor. The coordinating committee was 89% in support, and the planning board was unanimous in its support of this. And any future changes that may come about based on this updated stormwater standards, again, there would be a committee that would form what these should be, and ultimately it would come to the board as a text amendment to the UDO, so you would have a final say on what those standards were.
Mr. Chair. Yes, sir.
So this is really just the first step in a journey, and we're not, because, you know, when I talked with you about this, I wanted to make sure that this was not going to impose restrictions until it came back to us.
Yes, sir. Yeah, most of these are, none of these actions change the land use ordinance tonight. This just sets in motion the process to think about those and, you know, potentially come back at some point with a text amendment to modify those regulations. But there would be another, again, it'd be a text amendment, so there would be a public hearing and there'd be a public vetting of whatever that change would be.
And I do realize you said that at the end. I just wanted to read it back into the record. I'll make a motion to accept the updated stormwater standards.
Okay, we have a motion. Any discussion? One thing I would like to ask, and I know you're very familiar with this, but I would ask that when we work with these standards, like you said with litter, you don't know when you cross the municipal lines. Stormwater is the same way. So will our municipalities participate in this standard process so we can be consistent across the county?
We could reach out to them, and this would be our plan, but we could definitely reach out to them and ask if they'll participate. The standards across the county are vastly different. We have some basic standards in our ordinance. Towns like Indian Trail, Stallings, Monroe, Lake Park, they're all Phase 2 communities, so they have some fairly high standards, and they also own and maintain a lot of their infrastructure. So you have a lot of differences going on, but we could definitely reach out and talk to them about that, sure.
Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. All against? Okay.
The next strategy is school siting requirements. During the committee's background research, several members noted a few, mainly charter and private schools that had been built in the county that probably weren't in really ideal locations. And not that the committees wanted to say schools shouldn't go anywhere, but there should be some performance standards established for where schools locate, how they locate, things like driveway accesses, maybe some stormwater standards, some other things. And so that ended up coming out in the plan process. And this could increase capacity to address transportation and complementary development patterns along corridors. Supported by 94% of the public. All 5 subcommittees supported it unanimously, and both the coordinating committee and planning board also had unanimous support. And again, this would be one of those text amendment issues that would come back to you at a later date. We would have a committee put together to come up with what those standards should be. They'd be vetted out through that process, and then a text amendment would then be presented to the board.
Now, would that also include UCPS
Yes.
school sightings?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, any discussion? Commissioner Rushing?
Mr. Chair, Lee, although it would include UCPS, this is really not directed to UCPS
Correct.
specifically, but I know they would have to fit the criteria.
Correct.
What I was explained by y'all was, we have one private school that's in a really bad traffic situation, but it fell within the allowance of what they could do, and this is to try to avoid serious accidents.
Right now, schools are permitted by right, meaning it's just a zoning permit, site plan review. They're permitted by right everywhere in the county. And there are lots of uses that are permitted by right everywhere in the county, but sometimes you can have a by right use, but you may have what they call supplemental regulations, which add some review criteria to those by right uses. So, and again, I'm not saying that this should be one of these requirements, but sometimes you may have a use that's allowed in a RA40 district, but it may need to be on a major thoroughfare. So it kind of limits sometimes where they can go or how they access the property. Sometimes it could be screening. It could be a multitude of things. Sometimes you have, like I said, those supplemental uses, supplemental requirements. Sometimes it may require a special use permit. So some of those things would be vetted out through a committee. But there likely would be some supplemental standards added to schools.
Okay, Commissioner Rushing?
Lee, I'm trying to think of a charter school that's not in a town. We have one in Indian Trail, we have two in Monroe.
Off the
The
top
Apprentice
of-
Academy, is it in Union County or Monroe?
Apprentice Academy it was permitted through the county, although I understand that it's probably going to be annexed into the city of Monroe. Yes, it was permitted through the county. There's also Thales, which it's not a charter school. I think it's a private school, but it's off of Newtown. And then there's Union Day.
Yeah.
Right. Those
And it's
three.
in Weddington or?
No, that's in unincorporated
It's in-
Union County as well.
It was in Waxhaw.
It was in Waxhaw, and they moved up to the old, it was a seminary school. Thanks,
So
Brian.
we would, that's not, again, that's not Union County Public Schools, we're not going to be telling, because they already have some land purchased.
Right, yeah, those are not Union County Public Schools. Those are all either charter or
So this would
private.
be for private and charter schools.
It would apply to schools across the board, but I can tell you that, you know, our experience, Union County Public Schools already has some fairly high standards for how they locate schools.
Commissioner Rushing, on the one that really brought this to the forefront, they would have been required to have a turn lane, and as it exists right now, as I understand it, Lee, they didn't have to do anything.
Right, I mean, they had to comply with minimum zoning standards, minimum DOT standards.
Right. So UCPS always institutes a proper traffic flow.
Well, there's state funding for that, if I'm remembering correctly. So if the Union County Public Schools, I think they get state funding to help do turning lanes and things like that. But I don't know, do the charter schools and private schools get that same consideration from the state, you think?
I believe that's correct. I believe they do. So if the TIA identifies a deficiency that the schools are going to have to correct.
So it would just
yes.
make sense. I mean, you know, if we should require it then, if they, especially if they get help paying for it.
Right. And this wouldn't necessarily just be about traffic. It could be about screening from adjacent land uses or lighting requirements, or, you know, it could be a number of things that this is, but obviously traffic is a big impact.
But again, it would just mainly have effect in outside, mainly eastern Union County, because most of the western part of the county is in municipalities.
Right.
And they wouldn't be affected.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
With that, I'll make a motion that we accept the school siting requirements.
Okay, we have a motion. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Okay.
The next idea was the idea of increased open space requirements in rural areas. And what this is, I think the committee's recognize that 1 unit per acre may not necessarily be rural or rural enough to preserve rural character. Again, that's what that consistency, the strategy helps provide preserved rural character outside of water and sewer coverage areas. So if it's just well and septic, this is the idea of having an open space requirement. It was supported by the public, 94%. 4 out of the 5 subcommittees supported it. You can see the Business and Development Subcommittee did not. The Coordinating Committee had strong support at 89%, and then the Planning Board was unanimous in their support. So again, there's no standard here for you to see right now, because that would be a future text amendment that would come back before the board to look at. The thought is that this would only apply to major subdivisions, that this wouldn't apply to minors. That would be, maybe a father or, a family cutting out a piece of land for a child or a grandchild. So you wouldn't apply it to a minor, but a major subdivision, 8 or more than 8 lots, it would apply to. It would more than likely be some percentage of the property that would be dedicated as open space.
Any questions? Commissioner Rush?
So if you have 10 acres, right now we get complaints from time to time that a family wants to subdivide or build for children or whatever, and they're limited on how many lots they can make out of that. So even though they may have 10 acres, they may have to do it in larger lots. That would be a minor subdivision?
If it's less than 8 lots, or 8 lots or less, then it's a minor subdivision. And the way that works, it goes back to the lot of record, which that's a lot that existed in 1978. So once you go over 8 lots, out of that 1978 lot of record, then it becomes a major subdivision. There are a few caveats. So there are exemptions, state exemptions to the definition of a subdivision. For example, if you're cutting out a bunch of 10-acre lots, that's not technically considered a lot, so that doesn't count against you. There are some various other exemptions to that definition as well. But this would apply to lots that were really for sale and building development. So if you were going to build a house on it, or sell a lot off for somebody else to build a house, then that's really what a minor subdivision is. And you're right, there's other things that factor into how big that lot can be. One of the big ones in the rural areas is soil. So if the land, if the soil evaluation comes back and says, well, you need 5 acres to put a septic system on, well, that's really kind of your minimum lot size. I mean, zoning is 40,000 in those RA40 areas right now, but a lot of times it's larger than that.
So you wouldn't be taking away R40. I mean, if in the past I've heard people say we need to go to R80 or something, they come up with these numbers of 2 acres per house and things like that. Again, it goes back to the father, mother want to give their child an acre lot because it's hard to afford now, and especially in parts of the county, to be able to go out and buy. It's cost prohibitive, where a father or mother can give their child that lot of land and they can build a home on it. So we're not affecting that. This is just would be the guy who's selling several acres to build houses on.
Right. Now, I'll be honest with you, I'm not going to stand up here and tell you that it will never impact a family, because it may. I mean, you could have a family that's 9 kids, and once they hit that 9th lot, it's a major subdivision. So I don't want to leave you that it's never going to impact somebody, but that that 8 lots as a minor subdivision is a pretty big number. So I would say most of the minor subdivisions that we see are on the scale of 1 to 2 lots at a time.
I understand. The one committee that didn't support it, which subcommittee didn't support it, and do you know why?
There's a Business and Development subcommittee. I don't think anybody from the Business and Development subcommittee is here, but I think the primary reason is that you have some developers on that committee. So more open space means less lots.
Any further questions? Then I'll make a motion to accept the increased space requirement for rural areas. All in favor? Aye. All gets, okay.
Next is the idea to fund broadband internet expansion programs. This initially came from the Agricultural Committee. That's where this strategy initially, that's where it came out of. A lot of the opened my eyes. I wasn't aware of the technology issues that some of the farmers face and how they use data connections to really help them in that industry. But then, of course, COVID was going on as this plan was being formulated, and a lot of people were working from home. Kids were trying to go to school from home. So it kind of took on a life of its own as other committees looked at it and said, well, you know, my son's having a hard time getting online to go to class, or, you know, I can't, it's hard for me to work from home. So, you know, it would increase the capacity to support education, and it would support agriculture. 94% of the public either somewhat or fully supported it. All 5 subcommittees unanimously supported it. Coordinating committee had strong support, 89% were in favor, and the planning board was unanimous in their support. So this would be one of those issues that would have to be further studied if it was included in the plan. So this would just set the direction to start studying how we can expand broadband internet programs in the more rural areas of the county.
Any comments or questions? I think expansion of the internet is critical for agricultural and our citizens, so I'd like to make a motion to accept the broadband expansion programs. Commissioner Rushing?
A lot of companies are doing this. We're not talking about competing against Spectrum and other companies that are already doing it.
We're not, governments in North Carolina aren't even allowed to own and operate broadband. We can't operate our own system. That's been outlawed by the legislature. So this would be helping to support companies that already exist provide this service.
So it'd be like grant funding or giving them.
It could be a number of things, and that's what a future committee would look at. So this would set the stage for further study of this issue and figure out how we can actually fund these things.
So this is not a Union County crew going around putting in.
No.
Clients. Yeah, and I will say this, with Lynch's River, we have just in Pageland, South Carolina, we have faster internet than I've got at home, and it's wonderful. Like you said, in the rural areas, in a business, a farm especially, I mean, it's opened up new avenues for video cameras, for things that we couldn't do before. So it is a wonderful thing to have in the country, and you know, will help people work from home and students learn from home. So yeah, it's a good idea. Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion. All in favor? Aye. All right, Lee?
Next one is well testing on new homes. So one of the bigger issues that the coordinating committee really struggled with was wells, and you know they heard a lot of information about arsenic and manganese and all kinds of stuff and some of the wells in the county, and they really wanted to have some strategy in here to help folks understand what that might be. And new construction seemed to be one of the I guess easier ones to tackle. This would really be switching when the CO for a house was issued. So you wouldn't really get that CO until you knew the results of that well test. It's not saying you have to do anything with that result. If you're fine with having arsenic in your water, that's fine, but it's just it's knowledge. So if you find out that there's arsenic in the well and you want to go back to the negotiating board and say, well, I think we need to talk about a filtration system that gives you that opportunity to do that. So that's really what this does. And it provides an increased capacity to address public safety because people actually know what's in that water. 94% of the public somewhat or fully supported that recommendation. All 5 of the subcommittees supported it. The coordinating committee was 89%, so it was pretty strong there. And the planning board unanimously supported that proposal as well.
Let me ask you a question, because I got a well permit last week, and the cost of my well permit includes the testing. Well, how is this different?
So the cost of that well test, it does include that testing, and sometimes you might know, it depends on when the builder or the whoever's building that house applies for their well permit. We have had occasions where folks have applied for that well permit, got the CO, and then found out what was in that well. And that's unfortunate. Sometimes folks have, put down a substantial amount of money on a house and then found out, I've got bad water. Again, it doesn't happen all the time, but I think the coordinating committee looked at this and said, well, arsenic and manganese especially are big enough issues in the county to where, even one person getting by is problematic. So they really wanted to focus in on doing this, and that's why they included the strategy.
Well, I think it's great. And, we had experiences where people waited to the last minute after the house was built to drill a well.
Yep.
And with devastating results. So I think it's important. Go ahead, Commissioner.
I'm going to say this for the benefit of the ladies that spoke. I own a house on Clont's Lawn that had terrible water, and I'm not involved with that chicken house, but the water stunk. I mean, it was pitiful. And the reason I'm speaking to y'all, I encourage you to go ahead and have apply with environmental health and have them test your well and have all the documentation ready to go and talk to your neighbors, because later in our agenda we're going to present a funding formula. But we're all committed to getting water everywhere that we can afford to. I just will tell you that we've spent $10 million so far catching up the backlog, and we ended up with $50,000 per tap is what it cost us to get water in that area. So, but y'all do live in an area that's probably got a better chance than southern Union County, where you may have one house per mile. So y'all need to put on your cheerleader uniforms and, okay. And with that, I'll make a motion that this is not going to impose on any of the property rights of the people. It just basically identifies and tests the well so we know what we got.
Yes, sir.
I make the motion to accept it.
Any further discussion? Commissioner Rushing?
One thought would be, is normally the house is built, the well is drilled after?
It depends. Sometimes, you would think in a perfect world, before the house was built, you would know that you could get water, but it's not always that way. And I think that's what the coordinating committee was thinking about when they went with this strategy. They said, well, what about the folks that, they start construction, kind of like the issue you were talking about. And I know that wasn't bad water.
There's no water.
There was no water. So it's kind of getting at that issue. You can't really go to the end until you know what is in that water.
Right. And so that would be if a builder built a small subdivision, 4 or 5 houses, had a well on each house, they would know before the people bought the house, they would be given the report of what's
Yes.
in the well.
Yes.
And they can make that decision then.
Yes.
So it would pay the builder to go and drill the wells first
Mhm.
and have them tested. Any link between wells that, do we find anything now where like a neighboring well is tested and it's fine, and then this well next door to it might not be fine, or?
I'm probably not the expert on that issue. That'd probably be a Tracy Colley question,
Okay.
Environmental Health Director. But I could probably find out. Brian, I know.
I do want to clarify, it's not necessarily when someone before they purchase a home, they may have a purchase contract with a builder, but it's before the CO is issued on the home.
Right.
So it gives that potential owner armed information to go back to that builder and say, oh, hold on now. I'm buying this house from you and I've got an issue with this well. How can we solve this? Whereas in the past, they may have closed,
Yep.
transactions occurred, and now they find out the results later, and that time is gone.
Right.
So that would be something that would have to be reported in a real estate disclosure, correct?
By state requirements, yes, it should be disclosed.
Good, okay. Thank you.
And, you know, we've had conversations. I'd really, and I'm a realtor, I'd really like to see every time you transfer a house that the test has to be provided to tell the potential buyer. And I understand that opens a different can of worms. And,
Well, it's interesting you note that, and I won't spend a whole lot of time on it, but that was a strategy that was discussed at the coordinating committee level. Ultimately, that strategy did not make it into the draft plan, but it was discussed, and that was a big issue.
Mr. Chairman, and be mindful of the fact, you really got two kind of homeowners out there. You've got one building on a family track, and no matter how much they have to spend on treating that water, they're gonna build beside their parents. I mean, and the other one is a family that a realtor takes them to a builder who has lots. They know nothing about the area, they know nothing about the wells. This will really be more for the newbies going into an area than somebody like on Clont's Long Road where everybody up there knows the water's terrible.
all righty. So
I
you
made
a
the motion.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Next strategy are transition zones for donut areas. You saw them on the future land use map that's been adopted. This strategy would provide increased capacity to address some transportation issues and complementary development patterns. So this is just the idea of these donut holes that are out in the county. And a donut hole is an area of unincorporated property or unincorporated Union County jurisdiction that's completely surrounded by one or possibly two, three other jurisdictions. And you've seen a lot of those that have come up here for rezonings that are donut holes and they're being rezoned to a higher density land use. What this strategy would say is in those donut areas, if it's zoned R40 and developer or property owner wants to build under R40 standards, that's fine. Go right ahead and move forward. However, if you want a higher density, the county's not going to support that. You still have the right to apply for a rezoning, you still have the right to go through the process, but the policy would be staff would recommend to turn it down, and the ultimate policy would be to deny those rezonings. And go into the towns, annex into the towns, let them control those land uses on their borders. This would also help support some of those town visions that we've talked about so much. This was expanded somewhat. It did initially include most of the areas that were completely surrounded by municipalities. It was expanded to include some areas, I'll call them peninsulas, that were mostly surrounded by municipalities. The one exception to that rule was that the county was showing a commercial land use in that donut area, that would stay, that the county would consider rezoning future commercial land uses. So if the future land use map showed commercial, and those areas would not necessarily have to be annexed, or the county would definitely consider rezoning commercial areas. Ultimately, it doesn't mean that they have to rezone it, but it's not an automatic denial. But for the most part, any of those higher density residential rezonings, it would be a negative staff recommendation, and ultimately the policy would be to turn those down and tell folks to work with the towns to annex.
Did I hear you say that the peninsulas, because there's a number of peninsulas where you've got three sides
Yes.
by
There,
individual
it didn't
towns?
it didn't include all the peninsulas out in the county, because you're exactly right. There would be a ton of those. I believe that there's a peninsula here. So it was areas that if it weren't for one or two parcels that were connecting that piece to another unincorporated piece, it would be a donut hole. So it was very targeted. And this map, all these areas that you see in kind of this green hash area, these are the transition zones, those donut areas. So this is every single one you see.
Mr. Chairman, I know Chairman Helms and me have attended a lot of the municipal towns in the western part of the county, and this attendance has aided in better communicating with those people. And I think for us to be better neighbors with them and expect them to be better neighbors with us, we sort of respect these donut holes. And so with that being said, I would make a motion that we accept this policy for donut holes.
Mr. Williams?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to go ahead and support this element of the comprehensive plan along the consistent with the notion that we shouldn't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. That being said, I think ultimately what I would embrace more fully would be extraterritorial jurisdiction, where we actually work with the towns to establish areas and donut holes and in their peripheral areas where extraterritorial jurisdiction applies. But I think this is a good first step, and I support it.
Okay. Commissioner Rushing?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, there's already two items that we voted on here tonight that is going to limit the green area of the map. If you'll go back to the green area of the map and show, there you go. So we voted on two items at least tonight where we're going to limit that rural area from being developed. First of all, anything major subdivision is going to be limited, and then the well testing, because we don't have much access to county water in that green area. That's going to drive even further people who want to live in Union County, whether it be people who grew up here and graduated from high school here, or people that move in from another state to here. So the pressures are going to be put on those areas in the municipalities and in those yellow areas for growth. And if we're going to have our utilities concentrated there as well, then we need to be understanding that. So there's going to have to be something done. We still have voluntary annexation, where if a landowner wanted to go into a town to get higher density, they could. Is that correct?
That's correct.
We just don't have involuntary annexation, so they can't take them involuntarily.
Involuntary still exists, it's just a lot harder.
A lot harder to do, yeah. And so, again, that's just to make sure everybody understands, and I'll be voting for the recommendation, but we're doing things to limit the green area from being developed. That means the development's going to go somewhere. The demand's still going to be there, and our towns need to understand that, and the places where utilities, where sewer is available, need to understand that there's going to be a high pressure to develop those areas. Thank you.
Okay. And you made a motion to accept the transition zone, so we have a motion. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
The next one is to allow clustering where water and sewer are present. This would really apply to those green areas, those rural areas. So this wouldn't apply to the whole map of Union County. This would only apply to those green areas where water and sewer are present. That's very limited. I know there's some areas that are around Marshville and maybe Wingate where it exists. It would help preserve rural character outside of water and sewer coverage areas. So really what this is saying is if your land use designation is rural residential, but you somehow have water and sewer, then instead of doing we're not going to change the zoning. Zoning is going to be RA40, or I guess it could be RA20, but probably RA40. Zoning's not going to change. However, it makes sense to cluster those lots in a smaller area on that property. So that does a couple things. It would help preserve. It would set aside some land as common open space that would be preserved in perpetuity. It would set that aside. The HOA could lease that to a farmer. It could stay in trees. It could do a number of things with it that wouldn't be houses. It would also limit the amount of infrastructure cost. So that would limit the amount that the developer's spending up front. It would also limit the amount that whoever accepts that infrastructure in the long run spends to maintain it. So if you've got less miles of street to maintain or less miles of water and sewer line to maintain, that's less money overall. But it would still allow that clustering. If the market demanded, if folks wanted quarter-acre lots, you could do quarter-acre lots, but you're just not getting any more. If you've got 100 acres, we'll go back to that old adage, if you got 100 acres, you can get 100 lots. So whether that's spread out over the entire 100-acre plot or it's in a 25-acre area, still the same densities. You're not getting any densities, just allowing clustering. This also is one that, again, you don't see any standards here. We would develop standards with the committee. That would come back as a text amendment. So the board would get a chance to look at what those standards are and approve those as an amendment to the county development ordinance.
If the zoning was R40, what is and you're allowed to cluster, what's the minimum lot size?
So that would be one of those future standards that we would come back with a text amendment. So that is, it could be, Stoney, I know you remember the old smart growth regulations that allowed any lot size. It could be up to the developer, or you could establish what that minimum size could be. You could say you can't go below this X, but you would have a chance to look at minimum lot sizes, setbacks, all those different dimensional standards would come back before the board as a text amendment.
Commissioner Rushing.
The Agriculture Committee, why did they not support this?
I think they looked at it as
Foot in the door?
if water's. I'm sorry, say it again.
A foot in the door?
No, I think they looked at it as if water and sewer are there, why are you limiting what the density should be? Why shouldn't it be a higher density? If utilities are there.
So it was more of a, so rather than, it was more of a utilization of the resource.
I think some people felt that way, but I think some other folks felt that it should be 1 acre lots. We shouldn't allow clustering, period. That again, foot in the door.
Yeah.
So.
Because, it seemed like with the possibility of like a landowner had 100 acres, he's leased it to a farmer, now 25 acres is in the houses and you still have 75 acres to farm.
Right.
That might be appealing to some, other than the complaints of spray over and stuff like that.
Well, we've actually had some developers that have discussed that with the county, with common open space being the HOA leasing that back to a developer to allow the HOA to pay its bills, to allow some of that land to remain in agricultural use.
Right. And as far as the farmers looked at it more probably being the landowner, and if they did decide, if they ran sewer through their property, why could they only get a partial benefit? And that's one of the things that I've heard complaints over the years of, that one landowner can't get sewer, can't get water, can't get anything, and then magically the right person buys it and they got everything. And so that would be a concern here, that I can see is that, they can still be rezoned. We're not saying that they can't. We're just saying in this that if it's present, tell me exactly what we're saying. We're not preventing that from being rezoned.
Well, so this would only apply in those rural residential areas that are shown on the plan. So that's your future land use plan. That's going to say, this should be rural. This shouldn't be urban type or suburban style development. So that's going to be your first guide, is if you've got somebody standing up here saying, well, I want, 5 units per acre in this rural residential area. Well, it's not, future land use plan doesn't support that. But what this does say is, we do recognize that water and sewer are there, so we're not going to say you've got to spread out roads and infrastructure all over this entire piece of property. You can cluster your lots right here, and you're not getting any more density, but you can do some smaller lots.
So this would give an incentive to towns like Wingate or Marshville to annex in areas.
Sure.
And provide the services they provide to their other citizens.
Sure.
So they can all, if it's it's adjacent to a town, because a lot of that green was adjacent to some of those towns where
Right.
sewer may be available.
Right. If it's adjacent to a town and the applicant feels that they can get a better deal by annexing, they could definitely do that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Simpson?
clarify something for me, Lee. What I have says, what I printed off says, if water and/or sewer service is present. To what extent can you cluster if you don't have sewer?
You're not going to be able to really, I guess if you had a package plant for some kind of septic system, you might be able to cluster, but you're not going to be able to cluster that well if it's,
So that should probably say water and sewer instead of and/or sewer.
yeah, let me double check that real quick.
Yes,
So
Brian.
I think the goal here was not to exclude where the state allows septic systems that could serve smaller lots, because there are systems that can do that. So I think the recognition was, if it has water and whoever's developing it can make a septic system, a community septic system, if they have those, work, then it wasn't going to exclude that. So, I mean, certainly the board could say it's only going to be water and sewer, and you could make that, that standard. But I think the way they looked at it as in, it wasn't excluding the opportunity for someone to use technology that the state allows.
Right.
And to follow up, did you indicate that, say on a parcel where this was undertaken, that open space would be preserved into perpetuity? You couldn't come back later on and build high density on that?
No, I mean, I guess if some future board ever decided to undo that, but normally those common open spaces are recorded on a plat as common area. They're owned by the homeowners association, controlled by the homeowners association. And to my knowledge, at least in the unincorporated part of the county, we've never allowed anybody to come back and then redevelop that. And in fact, in the cluster standards that exist today, it specifically says that those are common areas in perpetuity. I mean, you can't build on them. You might be able to build a pool and clubhouse, but you can't build any more houses on them.
Thank you, Lee.
And we still have the situation where we do not count floodplains and stream buffers in calculating how many houses
Correct.
can be built.
Correct.
Okay. Mr. Chairman? Commissioner Rush?
I'd like to make the motion that we accept the cluster allowance where, and what I'm reading here says water and sewer is present. I would say that would be the motion, not and/or. I would go with just county sewer is available, is present. Is that possible? Is that okay? Brian saying yeah? Need anything else with that motion?
That will come back when we do the text amendment, right?
Right, but just to be clear.
Right.
sewer,
Yes.
Not
You're making it clear that you're
not a hogligan.
right. You're saying it's got to be both. It can't be one or
Right.
the other.
Well, yeah, sewer,
Yes.
where sewer's present.
Yeah, so if that passes, then when we bring back those text amendments to implement this, then that's how that'll be written.
Thanks.
So let me play devil's advocate. Does that eliminate what Brian just mentioned?
Yep.
He made the motion. He
You
made the
you made a
Already
motion?
made a motion.
Okay. All right, repeat your motion, please, sir.
Motion would be to cluster allowance where water and sewer is available, not and/or, but water and sewer is present.
Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Nay, sorry.
Nay, okay.
I was going to comment, but you cut me off, so I'm sorry. Sorry.
You were raising your hand before you even voted. What are you talking
I
about?
was trying to get your attention, Mr. Chairman. You took it as a vote.
Yeah. All righty.
Next strategy was to enact a policy to deny rezonings until funded road projects are complete. This idea is you've got a lot of road projects that are out there that are funded. Highway 16 probably being one of the forefront, but it's not built yet. And so this would be a policy that would explicitly say, until those road projects are complete, county will not rezone any of the properties along there that increase traffic. So it is recognized that there are some land uses that may apply for rezonings that don't necessarily increase traffic. A lot of your commercial land uses don't necessarily increase traffic. A lot of your residential rezonings sometimes do. But there are some commercial rezonings that do as well, such as a daycare facility. That's a big traffic generator. But this would be a policy just to say no rezonings until those things are funded and they're done. And I also want you to recognize that this is not going to apply to every single road that's operating at capacity or over capacity right now. This is going to be ones where there is a project, it's a funded project. So roads like 16 or Old Monroe Road. There's a lot of roads out there that are over capacity that don't have funded projects associated with them. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't still turn those, if somebody applies for a rezoning, you can still turn those down. You can still turn them down because the road's overcrowded, but this would be an explicit policy to say, we're going to deny those until those projects are complete.
Till the projects are
Until the
complete.
projects are complete. This was strongly supported. Public liked it, 94% for the 5. Subcommittees liked it. Coordinating committee strongly supported that. They did modify it for a proposal to apply to peak hour impact land uses. That's what I was talking about with ones that add, land uses that add traffic. And then planning board was unanimous in its support as well.
Commissioner Rushing?
I like this, but I'm concerned, again, with the commercial. You know, we say that we're trying to get commercial projects, and commercial projects are a little bit different than rezoning. If you've got a company, a major company coming into the area, and we're telling them, no, we can't rezone this property because the road's not ready yet. A little bit different than the big subdivision that's going in down the road. So if I could do, if I would say residential, enact a policy to deny residential rezonings until funded road projects are complete. Because again, some of these commercial projects are time sensitive, and you know, when we're talking about trying to recruit somebody to come into the area with grants and things like that, that's the only change I would make. Was there any discussion of that in the committee meetings?
There was actually a lot of discussion on that topic. Ultimately, the coordinating committee sort of backed off explicitly saying residential and applying it to land uses that increase peak hour traffic. That's going to apply to most residential rezonings. A lot of your commercial rezonings, they won't increase peak hour traffic. It's not to say that all of them won't. Again, daycares is a good example. Daycares probably going to increase peak hour traffic. if you wanted to entertain something like that, I would probably want Jason to weigh in, see if he was okay with
Is there a legal, if we just said residential rezonings, would there be a legal issue with that, maybe?
We need some time to take a look at that if we want to go down that path.
Right.
Is this a text amendment item also?
Yeah, well, there would have to be, no, so there would be this would be a policy decision, it'd be a policy in the comp plan. Right now, for rezonings, we strongly encourage applicants to submit a traffic study to show what those impacts would be. A lot of times, like I said, those commercial projects many times don't add peak hour traffic. Again, that's not to say all of them don't.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Lee, one thing just occurred to me listening to the other commissioners. I like this amendment, but when it says until projects are complete, and we know how time critical construction is, with the spring, wet rain, and the winter. Instead of, I'm just thinking out loud, instead of saying until funded road projects are complete, should we think about saying until construction is began? Because usually, once they begin construction, it's like the roundabouts, that's a 3 to 4 month process. But when they're blocked off the road and they're getting ready to build a roundabout, should we make a developer wait to apply until the roundabout's complete when they've already tore the road up? Do you see what I'm saying? It's not a question of if it's going to be done because they have began.
Sure. If the board wanted to entertain an amendment to that section to say, a policy to deny rezonings until those funded road projects start or begin construction, you could certainly change that. This was the recommendation from the coordinating committee and the planning board. I think at one point this was an add-on at the end. I think this was something that the towns had kind of brought up and we discussed with them.
Well, once most projects are began, it's a pretty tight timeline because that contractor will get it done and move on.
Right.
And then I also know we had trouble with EMT right after I came on the board because Google Maps don't update GPS until the DOT marks it complete.
Sure.
Isn't that right?
Generally, yes. Sometimes it's a little bit slower, but.
But what I'm saying is, do we want to hold people up when it's been done, but it hadn't been labeled complete?
Right. Sure, and I think complete to the coordinating committee meant the road was open and people could drive on it.
Which,
But I want the board to understand too. It's not just a roundabout project. That's a pretty quick turnaround. We're also talking about Providence Road. We're talking about 16. So that's a multi-year project.
right.
It's a multi-year
And 16, I'm not talking about 16, but I'm talking about widening of 84. To where they've got instead of 8 foot, 10 foot.
Commissioner Rushing? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I think I got a motion that encompasses what you're saying. Motion to enact a policy to deny residential rezonings until funded road projects are underway. Underway, a good term, that they began the process,
I think if we change that language to just say residential, I think Jason's saying he would probably want to take a look at that.
And you can come back and tell us later if that's
Right.
not.
I'd be glad to look at that. As Lee mentioned, this is one that came up late, and we vetted the sort of policy as proposed, so the
Right.
alternatives you're considering, we may want some time to look at that. They may be just fine. We just want to lay
Okay. But projects are underway. Because if we're just doing the rezoning while the project's going on, it's gonna take them a while to build the neighborhood anyway, so it's not. gonna
That's
be-
right. And we could table it and let legal and planning bring it back to us with all the.
And you're gonna be bringing it back anyways, right?
If one of these is tabled, we would bring that back at a future meeting.
So you think we need to table that then, Jason, or do you want to go in that direction?
I would suggest you do that. I think the discussion has given them some feedback to take a look at a rule that might get
Okay.
what you're looking at.
Yeah.
Table it?
Okay,
Motion
your
table.
motion to table? Okay. All right, any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, next one was the idea to have a quarter-cent sales tax for transportation projects. This was to help increase capacity to address multi-jurisdictional issues. Again, it's pretty straightforward. Have the voters vote on a referendum for a quarter-cent sales tax to generate extra revenue to help match or bring transportation projects faster. All 5 of the subcommittees strongly supported this. 94% of the public supported it. However, only 67% of the coordinating committee supported it. And then the planning board was in opposition to this to this strategy. And their main concern was over NCDOT's efficiency at delivering products. It wasn't that they didn't think it was a good idea. They just said, well, we're going to collect money and then DOT is not going to be able to help us deliver some of these projects.
And based on that, I'd make a motion to reject it, to reject the quarter-cent sales tax for transportation. Commissioner Rushing?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just listening and seeing stuff out there in the world where people are having real losses and damages to their vehicles through potholes, through bad roads. I'm going to support the rejection of the quarter-cent sales tax. But at some point in time, we are going to have to address this with DOT to say that, we pay our gasoline tax, we pay already. What is NCDOT going to do to fix these problems? And this is something that, that a lot of people think that the county has control over, which we don't. We don't own any right-of-ways. The towns will have control over some of their streets. But as far as these main roads, that's NCDOT, and we pay for it already. And I think we have to be very careful in trying to create new ways of paying for something that we already pay for, and finding ways of taking it out of our citizens' pockets. And then the fact that the businesses in this county, it is a difficult thing for small business to go in and change all their registers just to add a different sales tax in. So it is a hassle and an irritation. But yeah, I'm supportive of the motion to reject the quarter-cent sales tax. But at some point in time, we as a board, and hopefully every town in the county, can band together and just demand that DOT do something about these roads. It's terrible. Thank you.
Okay, we'll have a motion to reject. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
We have one more. The last strategy is establishing a rural water authority. The idea was to help provide increased capacity to address public safety. The idea was to create rural water authorities out in the county and to possibly be able to go out and get low-interest loans or grant money to help extend water lines in those areas. 94% of the public was supportive of it. 4 of the 5 subcommittees unanimously supported that proposal. 89% of the coordinating committee supported it. And then the planning board didn't necessarily support it. They have concern over drinking water safety, and they really want the board to consider additional efforts to address the issue of unsafe drinking water. That was the planning board's feedback.
This is a very complex question, And just the description of what a rural water authority is, can be, is it multi-county? Just, there's a lot. I would suggest that we table this and let more information be provided to the board on the pros and cons, because I know there is pros with the grants. There are cons also, to make sure everybody's informed, and we'll do further study is my recommendation. I'll make a motion. We table it.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I agree with your motion, but I would love for us to have a work session on this. If it has to, I can start it off against it. Then I talked to Commissioner Williams, and he was giving me some of the reasons that he thought it was good for Union County. And I want to understand what a rural water authority is, what we've got to do with it. So I'm in favor of it once we're educated to it.
Gotcha.
So I support the chairman's motion to table.
Any further discussion? Commissioner Rushing.
And as well, I've actually looked at this in the past, and being able to buy water from the most convenient source, wherever that source would be, is important, because it actually gets us closer to some of these sources than we would be on our own, with the understanding that Union County would be providing water to a lot of this, because we do have water available that's come at great cost. And a lot of the people that are in the rural areas of the county were promised that water by politicians over time, and we need to meet that however we can and be as creative as we can to do it. And if the Rural Water Authority helps get additional grants to get it to people, then I'm for that. I would like to see what we can do with some of the money, the grant monies that we've already gotten, as far as extending water lines out to the rural areas of the county, down the main highways and the places we can get them to now. And then, again, this makes this more feasible, because it's going to be very hard for anybody to try to do what we've done with Yadkin and, drag water across two counties at $300 million price tag. Be very hard for a rural water authority to pop up and do that. But these rural water authorities have successfully provided water in other places. And I'm in agreement with the motion to table it. We need more discussion on this in a work session.
Any further discussion? Okay, there's a motion to table. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
That brings us to the end of all the strategies that the coordinating committee and planning board, now you have discussed and seen. So you've got a couple of options on what to do with the overall plan. There's a lot of good things that you voted to accept tonight and sort of put in motion. My suggestion would be go ahead and approve the Union County Comprehensive Plan is amended tonight, recognizing that there's a couple of items. One was rejected, the quarter-cent sales tax. That would be one amendment, so that would not be in the adopted plan. And there were two items that would come back. That would be enacting a policy to deny rezoning, so that if you adopted it as amended tonight, that would not be included. We would come back and discuss that a little bit further, and certainly you could amend the plan to include that if you wanted to, or if you didn't want to include it, could just reject it outright. And the other one is studying the establishment of a rural water authority. Same thing. If the board decided at a future date that they wanted to go back and include that in the plan, you certainly could. You could amend that plan, or if you didn't want to include it, just reject it, and the plan would stand on its own. That would be staff's suggestion, is to go ahead and adopt it as amended. That way, some of the things that you've talked about tonight that you like, that you accept, we can go ahead and get the ball rolling on some of these, and get the new land use map going, so we can apply that to new rezonings and special use permits and new development.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
I'd like to make the motion that we adopt the Union County 2050 Comprehensive Plan as we've amended it tonight.
Okay. Commissioner Simpson.
Lee, I've heard you mention several times future committees. We'll look at this.
Yes.
We'll look at that. I've had folks contact me about the 2050 plan that said it didn't go near far enough. And I know I'm old enough up here to have been through other long-range plans, and sometimes they get put in a 3-ring binder and placed on a shelf. So with that in mind, I would like to, I'll support the motion, but I would like to encourage, as a part of that, come back with further information to create a way that this can be a living document, such that we revisit it, say on an annual basis, to see if we're making progress in the direction that everybody in this, all these folks that wanted to see it happen, that we're making progress in that direction.
I'll certainly say that that's definitely something that we intend to do. Just good planning practice anyway. Even though this is a 2050 plan, certainly we're not going to wait until 2050 to come back to some future board to say we need to do something different. Good planning policy is to revisit these about every 4 to 5 years. So if I'm not standing up here talking about this again pretty soon, then I'm not doing my job. So that's our plan, is that we're going to start doing this. We're going to update this in a timely manner, along with good planning practices.
Commissioner Rushing.
And what I envision is that when they come to your department to begin with and say, we're planning a subdivision, and we're planning on we're asking for rezoning, we're doing this, we're doing that, that you're going to be able to tell them at this time, going by this living document, that the road's not been funded, the wells have to be tested, whatever you come back with, that you're going to be able to tell the developer at that time what he's facing.
Yes, sir.
And that you're going to be telling the planning board, what they're facing, because anybody can ask for it. It's just the process along the way, they're going to be told this is not likely to happen.
That's right. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
And I agree with Commissioner Simpson. I think it does need to be reviewed regularly. We have seen how much our county has changed in a matter of a couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
So I would expect that we have similar discussions annually to ensure that we're on target.
Sure.
Commissioner. Great.
Commissioner Simpson, I agree with Commissioner Helms. I appreciate you saying that. Really, we've reached a point in Union County where everything is a living document, and if it's wrong, we need to change it before the end of the master plan and stuff like that. So you're wise beyond your years in some of your statements, but I'm just saying.
He's reminding me of my age.
Well, he hadn't got any room to talk, does he?
But it is good, and Commissioner Rushing said it too. We need to look, if it's not working, we need to fix it now and not wait till it gets in worse shape, so.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the comprehensive plan, 2050 comprehensive plan as amended. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir.
If I could, for just 20 seconds, I would like to thank our coordinating committee that helped put this together. They were invaluable. I think there are a couple of members here tonight. Archie Morgan and Julie Thomas are here. And also Jonathan Thomas is on the planning board, so he also helped in putting this together, and they've been invaluable. I also want to recognize Bjorn Hansen, who's sitting in the back. Bjorn's our long-range, he heads up our long-range planning section. This was Bjorn's baby, and he did a great job coordinating it and bringing this whole thing together, and ultimately with this product.
Thank you.
Thank you for allowing me that opportunity.
I would like to say to the committee and Bjorn that's here, we only rejected one, and on the tabling, we just want to put some meat on the bones and understand what we're doing. So I don't want you to think there was 3 turned down. The more we talked about it, the more questions we came up with. Thank you.
Okay. Next, we have the item you young ladies have been waiting on. We're going to talk about Shoreline Water Extension Program, item number 40. and that will be applicable to what you asked tonight.
Good evening, Commissioners, staff, and the public, and I'll try to get enough information out there so that the ladies know what to do. So this agenda item is really a follow-on from the workshop we had last week, where we went through and covered some changes to the program, and it seemed like that there was general consensus that this was the direction that you wanted to go. So this agenda item actually touches on those 3 areas where we actually need to make some changes to start the new program. We finished in 2 years the backlog, and so we're ready to start a year earlier than we had originally planned. So what we are asking you to do is take a vote today and approve some changes so that we can incorporate those changes into the program. And so I'm going to start reading them off. The first is ranking criteria. We summarized that reduced it from 130 points to 100, and we emphasized those things that were important to you. One is water quality, both the major and minor categories, so that's worth 40 points. Water quantity is worth another 20, so 60% of the points are all tied to water quality and quantity. So health. Most of it, the rest of the points have been moved around to emphasize participation rates, neighbors trying to get more of their colleagues in the community to try to join the program. And so the more people you can get to sign up, the better the participation rate and the more points you're going to get. And we saved 5 points for system benefits. A little bit subjective on our part, but in terms of, does it close loops? Does it allow us to manage the system better? And so that's the first thing that really changed from the existing program to what we are asking you to take a vote on. And in the agenda item, the way we wrote it up, you can see that it's a gradient, so the better you're able to do in terms of getting participation, the worse your water quality, the more points you're going to get, so that we're going to be able to rank you higher. The hope being that we are going to be able to help the people that need it the most, the fastest. And so that's the plan on how we rank in the scoring criteria. On the cost share, and this is really where the big change is, you asked us to look at trying to find a way to, one, change the way that we're doing it. Right now, what's in the ordinance is a assessment program. We've actually recommended deleting that method and switching to a cost share program. And again, this is where your direction really came into play, because depending on the citizens, the participants' ability to get their neighbors to participate, the higher the participation rate, the more points they get, and the more customers per mile that they're able to get, the higher the point total. And the more points you get, what this really means is the less it will cost you. And so we are incentivizing neighbors to talk to their neighbors. And so we're also trying to eliminate the free rider problem in the sense that if you just wait for your neighbor to pay for the short line to go in, once the line's in, you can just connect and pay the tap fee. And in trying to eliminate that problem, the best we could do is the better the participation rate, the lower we're going to make the fees. And so there's a range where if you get high participation, the fee will actually be lower than the free rider. If you get no participation or very low, it's going to cost a little bit more than the free rider problem. And so that's how we fixed that, and we think that it actually was better as a result of the guidance that you gave us. The third is the application period. We had originally hoped to start this program July 1. Clearly, we are past July 1 and haven't started the programs, and so the action requests the authority to start the program and have the application period open for 90 days starting September 15th, and going for 90 days through December 14th. In the workshop last week, you had talked about giving them more time, going 120 days. So we've given 90 days in that on the back end, we're going to need time to do analysis and to rank and to come back to you with a proposal on our evaluation of the applicants, sort of where they fall and everything else that needs to go into it. So we need time on the back end. So that's why we stopped at 90 days. Sort of what we've done on the front end is if this is approved today, we're pretty much ready to go tomorrow with making everything public in terms of communication, in terms of having the website up so that people can get information. So they can literally start tomorrow trying to get information and start talking to their neighbors about the short line program. And so if you add that gets you to 120 days. And so as soon as you give us the word, we are going to make everything available on the website. We are going to do, and I checked with communications folks, we're going to do all the social media, all the print, all the emails, and everything else as soon as possible to give folks as much time as possible to get their applications together, get their neighbors involved, and to the extent that our staff in Union County Water needs to go talk to people and do some education, we're prepared to do that as well, as best as we can, whether it's through video meetings or anything else, so that we can, again, our interest is in getting as many customers as possible. The more customers, the better. And so we're going to do everything that we can to generate interest in the program. And so those are really the changes that are being made. And so what we're asking to do is take an action to adopt the ranking criteria, take action to adopt the program cost share as described, and then change the program application date to September 15th, and then for that to go officially for 90 days. And then lastly, all of these changes are codified in the ordinance changes that we need to make. And so that's the last thing that you're going to have to do, so adopt those 4 things today. It's quick, and I hope I explained it clearly. If you have any questions, I'm happy to take them.
One of the things that in the last program, we committed to $5 million a year funding to do the process.
Yes, sir.
That commitment is still there, right?
That commitment is going on. It's in the capital improvement plan, $5 million a year going forward for every year, and it will only change at the direction of the board.
Okay.
Plus the change left over, right?
Yes, sir. All the change left over, it's an appropriation, so we can't move it to another program without
And
your
it's
approval.
over $1 million, right?
I think right now it stands, I can't give you an exact number, but I do think it is over $1 million. And I did check from the workshop, so when applicants pay their application fee, that money also goes back into the program.
Okay. One other question. Young ladies that came today, let's say that this presentation didn't totally clear it up for them. Who would they contact to understand it better?
Well, it'll be on the website,
Okay.
but they can go to the website for information. There's a frequently asked questions document that'll be up so that they can look at it. The application was set up as a web form. We're actually converting it to simply a simple document so they can print it and fill it out in hard copy. If they have any questions, they're welcome to call Union County Water Customer Service, and they'll connect you with Thomas Mann. He is the program manager for the Shortline Water Project, and that's Mann with 2 N's, if that matters. And we'll provide whatever information and updates the public needs.
Okay. Thank you. I'll make a motion to adopt the program ranking criteria, adopt the program cost share, adopt the program open application start date and duration, and application ordinance amending Union County Water and Sewer Ordinance and Division 6 of Article 4 of Chapter 34 of the Union County Code. Commissioner Rushing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This process, from the time I was on the board in 2002 to 2006, it was the self-help program, and now we've got another form of the program, another version of the program. And, Chairman Helms and I, we were in a lot of 2-on-1 meetings together back in, I guess, 2015, 2016, where we asked and we said, listen, this big water line that we're bringing in, we need T's. We need ways to get this to the communities along the way, because they weren't in there. Remember that, Chairman Helms?
That's correct.
And Chairman Helms and I, told them in those 2-on-1 meetings that these need to be there. We stood by that, and now we have the potential. One of those T's should be at Sykes Mill Road. I don't know exactly where all they will be, but there should be one there. And we now have to get the water close enough to people in eastern Union County in order for them to facilitate this program. So there's more work that we're going to need to do in the town of Unionville, the town of Fairview. There's a lot of towns that receive money, grant monies that can be used for water infrastructure. The county has received some grant money that can be used for water infrastructure. So getting it close to people so they can get it closer with this self-help program that we have is going to be key to the success of this. And you know, whether we're looking at a rural water authority or however we do it, I remember back in 2004 maybe, we had because of the hill splitter, they were going to shut off any water line extensions across creeks, major creeks. So at that time, at a cost of, we were told approximately $2 million, we ran a water line from down Highway 218 from New Salem Elementary School all the way to, I believe, Goose Creek, and connected that and made that northern loop that had been promised for many years. And we finally did that. And it's so important to the people, again, and it's important to the system because completing those loops allows us to deliver water other places and doesn't leave that water just sitting in the line. So I am, of all the things that we've done, this program is one that I'm proud of. And it's just incredible being able to help people like the ladies who came up and they didn't have any water in the well. It wasn't just contaminated water, they had no water. And being able to solve that solution where I think she was sharing water with her neighbor at their well and just what neighbors are willing to do for each other. I think of all the things in this county, the people who have county water, I think would love to help the people who don't. And just so proud of this program. And you know, I know sometimes it doesn't make sense to the business sense, but it makes sense to the basic need for water. Food, shelter, water, and those things are very important, and this is a good program for Union County citizens. Thank you.
Okay. Any further discussion? We have a motion on the floor.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Simpson.
Yeah, I'd just like to tap on to, pardon the pun there, Stoney, what Stoney said. I remember the first year I was on the board back in 2011, this came up, had several people call me and said, water's just right around the corner. Sure would like to be able to tap on that county water. And we worked through that, and of course we've moved on past that. And here we are tonight with this updated method of our short water line extension. This has been a political issue, it's been a policy issue, and as Tony mentioned, it's really an ethical issue for those people that have poor water and need quality water. So throughout these years of discussion, I've heard figures thrown out, 50 million, I've heard 200 million, but I think we are at and I worked real hard for the Yadkin project. I don't apologize for it. I think it's a 75 to 100-year project that will bring water to eastern Union County, and I make no apologies. I think we're at a point, certainly it's a topic in the 2050 plan of great concern. It's been a topic of great concern on this board, and I think at this point, I don't know whether I need to charge you, Young, or Public Works, or who we need to charge, but I think it's high time that we began the process of looking at a capital improvement plan or a strategy or a long-range plan or whatever to provide rural water to this county now that we're in that position. Mr. Raitt raised the issue of what some of these projects have cost us on short water line extensions, and I don't deny that those folks needed water, but is there a more efficient and more effective and more cost-effective way to do that? So I think it's high time we move in that direction.
Mr. Chairman, can I offer some additional information that might be useful?
Yes, sir.
To the board and the public? So in addition to the $5 million we set aside for short line extension program, in the CIP, there's also a line item for water main transmission extension. So that's also a separate $5 million line. And one of the things that we asked our consultants, Brown and Caldwell, the engineering firm that is looking at our water master plan, is knowing how important this is to the board, I told them, as you think about how we extend water lines, please keep in mind that rural water availability is important to the board. It is a priority. So as you think about how you're going to extend the water lines, please keep that in mind, that the east side of the county is important. We're not just extending water where we already have water. We're going to extend water where there isn't water. And we have some lines to do that. And so one of the things we're going to come back to you is a master plan that looks at how we extend water into the eastern side of the county so that it's more available to the residents that live over there. So we hear what you're saying, Commissioner Simpson, and we're already working on it.
Thank you.
Good. Commissioner Ray.
Before I vote to support your motion, I swear, Commissioner Simpson, that sounded like a launch of your next campaign.
Real high.
All right, we have a motion on the floor, and we've had discussion. All in favor? Aye. Okay. Thank you, Ernie. All right, next we have a memorandum of agreement regarding allocation of opioid litigation settlement proceeds.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Carolyn Mayer. I'm a senior staff attorney here with the Office of Legal Counsel, and I'm here to present to you this memorandum of agreement that the state of North Carolina DOJ attorneys and stakeholders from counties across the state have developed in response to a national settlement over opioid litigation. You will be asked this evening to consider a resolution to whether or not to approve this MOA, and as part of that, the resolution would include authorizing the county manager to approve and sign the MOA, as well as to accept any funds that come out of the settlement. As you are aware, there has been a national set of national litigation, national lawsuits over the opioid epidemic that has hit this country. The recent settlement was $26 billion, of which North Carolina as a whole might expect to receive around $750 million of that over the course of 18 years. And this MOA is intended to set out a way for the settlement funds to be provided and allocated across the state of North Carolina to local governments across the state of North Carolina. It describes the future-focused purposes for which the settlement funds may be used to directly remediate opioid impacts, and it outlines compliance reporting and program auditing requirements related to the use of the settlement funds. This is just a map that I retrieved from the Association of County Commissioners showing local governments across the state that have already approved this MOA. And by my count, I believe it was 50 counties and I want to say 17 municipalities so far have signed on. Obviously, there hope to be the Association of County Commissioners and the state hope that there will be more. As I mentioned, the national settlement total was around $26 billion. North Carolina would receive around $750 million over the course of 18 years. A large portion of that comes in the first 3 years, and then tapers off throughout the course of the rest of the remaining 15 years. The allocations across the state are based on population and local impact of the opioid crisis. So it's not simply that the biggest counties receive the most money, it is where have the impacts been felt the most in combination with population. Under the national settlement agreement, the default allocation puts 15% of the settlement funds directly to local governments, with the remaining 85% under the control of the state. This North Carolina MOA, however, basically reverses that. It says the state can keep 15% of the funds to do with what it will. At the General Assembly will decide how they want to use the funds. 80% of the funds comes directly to the county, and I believe 17 municipalities with populations of 75,000 or more. And then there's an additional 5% that the county could receive should we activate, if you will, the county incentive fund. And what that means is if both of the municipalities in Union County with 30,000 or more residents sign on to this MOA in addition to the county, Union County would receive that additional 5%. So for Union County, that means City of Monroe and the Town of Indian Trail. If both of those entities sign on to this MOA, Union County would receive additional funding. So what that looks like is if Union County signs on, we can expect to receive around $8.8 million without the county incentive fund. If that county incentive fund is added on, the potential total could be up to $9.35 million over 18 years from this national settlement agreement. All of the settlement funds must be maintained in a special revenue fund, which would be separate from other county funds. They may not be commingled. If the county chooses to put those funds into an interest-bearing account, any interest earned on the settlement funds must be used for opioid remediation as well. And I will note for you all that no funds get expended without your say-so. You are the final call on how any of the funds that come into the county go back out the door towards these opioid remediation strategies. So I'll just make sure that you know that tonight. And tonight, the only decision you're making is whether or not to accept the funds. And you will be presented with options in the future on how you might wish to spend those funds. The settlement fund expenditures are subject to independent audits, and the county would have to file an annual audit and as well as submit an annual financial report specifying how those funds have been spent out in the community. It's just an intention of the committee that developed the MOA that there would be a transparency related to the expenditure of the funds. The settlement funds may be used only for opioid remediation expenditures consistent with the MOA, and only for funds expended after or incurred after the county's execution of the MOA. So in other words, we can't look back and reimburse ourselves for past expenditures. If the county happens to not use settlement funds for their permitted purposes, the county would have 60 days to cure. Otherwise, we're subject to some other legal consequences from the state DOJ. In order to use the settlement funds, the county is also required to hold at least one annual public meeting, inviting all the municipalities in the county to receive input as to proposed uses of the funds. Again, all uses of the funds, all final choices would be at the discretion of the Board of Commissioners, but you are required to at least receive input from the municipalities. And there are two pathways for using funds under the settlement agreement, under this MOA specifically. There's an option A and an option B. Option A is for more targeted high-impact strategies and your sort of base level core strategies for spending the funds. If you choose option A strategies, which can be found in the Exhibit A of the MOA, which you can find in your packets, you don't have to have any additional strategic planning meetings involved if you choose option A, just that one annual meeting with the municipalities. If you choose option B strategies, there are a lot more options available to you, a lot more opportunity for some creative strategic thinking. But what that would require is a separate collaborative strategic planning process that happens at least every 4 years and potentially more frequently. And I'll get into that a little bit more in just a couple slides. Here on your screen, you can see just a few of the examples of option A permissible uses of the settlement funds. Some of them include evidence-based addiction treatment, including medication-assisted treatment, opioid treatment programs, treatment offered in conjunction with justice system programs, recovery housing support, early intervention programs, and reentry programs for incarcerated persons. Again, I'll remind you, if you choose something from this option A list, you only need to have that annual public meeting with the municipalities involved in order to expend these funds. The option B collaborative strategic planning process, as it's known in the MOA, is a process which involves engaging local stakeholders to explore root causes of drug misuse, identify and evaluate potential strategies for addressing the opioid epidemic, looking for opportunities to fill gap in existing programs, those sorts of things. This option B, collaborative strategic planning process is required prior to spending settlement funds on the Exhibit B activities, which, as you can see in the MOA, spans quite a number of pages, especially in comparison with option A. And if you end up choosing option B, this planning process would result in a report from the local stakeholders that for you, the Board of Commissioners, and it's non-binding with non-binding recommendations on how you might choose to use the funds. Again, non-binding, you can make the final call, but the idea is that you would get more sort of the boots on the ground folks giving you suggestions on where they think the funds might be most impactful. If you choose option B and you want to continue spending money on those expenditures into the future, the county would have to periodically undertake a new set of collaborative strategic planning processes, probably simply just to make sure that the funds continue to be spent in the way that makes the most sense in the community. And this process, this strategic planning process, is separate from and in addition to that required annual meeting with the municipalities. So it's that's that extra step that I talked about with the option B. And here are just a few of the examples of permissible uses for under option B. You can see they are definitely related to option A, but they're a little bit more expansive. They're a little more broad-based. So, things like treating opioid use disorder and co-occurring substance use disorders or mental health conditions, supporting people in treatment and recovery, connecting them to care for opioid use disorder and co-occurring substance use disorders and mental health conditions, and addressing needs of criminal justice involved persons, as well as prevention for the misuse of opioids. And with that, I will wrap up my presentation and take any questions you might have.
Mr. Ray.
Thank you for the very thorough presentation. We don't have to choose option A or B tonight, do we?
Absolutely not. No, that is only once you've decided to take the money down into the future, you can direct.
So the issue tonight is really the MOA.
Correct.
To get the ball rolling.
Correct.
With that being said, I would like to make a motion to adopt a resolution approving the memorandum of agreement, MOA, between the state of North Carolina and local governments on proceeds relating to the settlement of opioid litigation and authorizing the county manager to approve the MOA and any related documents required in order for the county to accept any settlement funds.
Okay, we have a motion. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Carolyn.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Next, we have item 42, Water and Sewer Extension Ordinance Amendments.
Hello again. This is just a short presentation on some ordinance changes to the Water and Sewer Extension Ordinance. And I'm just going to run through them briefly so you have an idea as to why these are necessary and what we are asking of the board today. We have an ordinance that codifies how Union County Water will interact with developers, customers, and businesses that make use of our infrastructure. And what we are finding now is that there are certain aspects of the ordinance that need updating to stay current with sort of the circumstances that we find ourselves in, with best practices, policies, and approaches, especially because we have limited sewer capacity. What we're finding is that some of the language is not precise enough that people that want to make use of our system are, I'll just simply say broadly that they're finding loopholes or trying to find loopholes in our ordinance to get capacity when we just don't have any. And so this agenda item organizes all those changes to try to get those definitional items in our water and sewer extension ordinance cleared up so that it's easier for everyone to use. And so we have some definitional changes that we are making to address terms like accessibility and what does adjacency mean. If you're adjacent to a water line, you don't need a permit. So, people are trying to use the rules to their advantage, and rightly so, and so we're trying to clear up some of these rules. Another one involves construction permits and clarifying when a construction permit is required. Plan reviews and approvals, when plans are submitted to NCDEQ and when capacity is available. So just, again, trying to provide further definition to the permit review process so that applicants understand that NCDEQ has a step in this process, an important one, and that they make all the final approvals to the permits. Trying to address that there are projects that sometimes we are not able to give you capacity because it is upstream from a capital project that we need to complete before we can provide that capacity. So again, just trying to provide further clarity around how things work. The extension agreement, and this one is an important one because this actually addresses a question that Commissioner Rushing asked what seems like a long time ago, in that, if you have a permit, and you make certain progress, we almost automatically give you an extension. So if you can get half your project done, we're going to give you an extension for another 5 years if you need it or if you ask for it. And then they were eligible for a second permit, but we weren't able to answer the question to Commissioner Rushing as well, what are the conditions for a second extension? And so what we've written into the ordinance now is if you complete 75% of your project by the end of the first extension, you're eligible for a second extension to finish the project. And so that answers Commissioner Rushing's question about the second extension and how would a developer get that. And again, it also takes away the subjectivity. We're not making a decision. It's just a matter of meeting the criteria, which is 75% of your project has to be completed by the end of the first extension. And so really what it does is just go through and provide clarifications on a lot of these items in terms of donated infrastructure extension agreements so that developers, when they're working with us and trying to get their permit, have a clear understanding of what's permissible and what is not in the water and sewer extension ordinance. And so what we are asking the board to do is adopt this ordinance amending the Union County Water and Sewer Extension Ordinance and Article 4 of Chapter 34 of the Union County Code. And I think one of the attachments is Exhibit A, which, it's 36 pages of the actual Article 4. It shows you all the changes that are being proposed and the actual language that are being asked for in the ordinance changes. So that's just a quick summary of what's being asked for and why.
Commissioner Rushing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just to clarify, how does this affect projects that are already in the hopper?
That is, that's a good question. I can try to come up with a reasonable answer, but I honestly don't know off the top of my head right now how that would affect current projects. I'd have to go back and check, and Brian, I don't know if you...
Can you come up to the microphone? Can you come up to the microphone?
Yes, sir.
We're going to have to pull it close to Unyi so I can hear him.
Absolutely. So part of the challenge that we run into, especially on where we have this cap in place, and even when we don't have the cap in place, is how are projects ranked in order to be able to receive capacity at the time capacity is available. And the ordinance, honestly, didn't give us a lot of clarity in how to deal with that. So one of the changes that's here allows us to essentially create a holding place for projects that are affected by a capital project that the county has. So of no fault of the developer or the property owner, they can't move forward with their project because we have a CIP project that's preventing that. But we had no mechanism to not penalize them. So one of the changes in the ordinance actually allows us to sort of essentially create a holding place so they're not penalized at some point when that project is ready to move forward. There'll be flow available for them as long as they're in ranked order. So if they're number 4,
knocked out. They don't
Yeah.
get knocked out of the order.
They don't get knocked out, exactly. And we felt that was important because it's no fault of the property owner developer that our project is slowing them down. So that is an important component for those that are in line now.
There was a use it or lose it. I've heard that term, use it or lose it. program
So,
in place.
obviously, the past, the way we've collected system development fees and allocations has changed over the years. There was a use it and lose it. There's also those that have paid for it and still have time left that they've paid for it. So there's kind of a hodgepodge of capacity that's out there. We do evaluate that. I know Mr. Bowling asked that question. We do try to evaluate where projects are. Is there capacity available? I'm not going to say that there aren't some that we could put back in the hopper, so to speak, but we're not ready to make that recommendation at this point.
And commercial projects, are they going to be ranked differently than residential projects?
No, sir.
Can
It's-
they be?
Yeah, unfortunately, of course, we don't have a utility-based rationale for residential over commercial. So it's really who gets to the finish line for their project being ready to be approved. So if a commercial gets to the finish line first, they're number one in line. If it's residential that's first, they're number one in line. And the way it's set up is there's no leapfrogging. So if you're number one, we will not release capacity until first the board gives us capacity, and second, there will not be a release until there's enough to serve number one. So number two can't go ahead of number one.
Yeah, and I guess what I'm asking, rather than somebody that's had a residential project in the planning phase longer, not leapfrogging them, but back to the kind of the use it or lose it philosophy, that maybe a commercial project takes longer to put together, like an industrial park or something like that.
You mean someone who's approved?
Yeah,
So
are we gonna give them the same time period?
absolutely. So they have the same amount of time as far as their development goes, as far as whether they wish to have the extension, if their project is still under construction. So it doesn't, that extension applies to all projects, not just commercial or
So
residential.
60 days for execution, is that, they have 60 days to do what?
60
I see
days.
60 days of execution on our notes here.
I think that's, if I'm not mistaken, that is to notify us of any changes in ownership. I think that's what that's about.
Okay, so that's not, they don't got 60 days to do
No,
it?
no, sir.
Okay, so they, is there a way of protecting a commercial industrial project that they wouldn't, maybe they get a longer period of time, or that again, they're not having to come ask for extensions under the hopes that we'll give it to them?
In this current standard, no, sir. And I would venture to say that we would have to sit down and have a very long conversation with our legal department. I think that would be a challenge. Currently, it is set up as in everyone plays by the same rules, commercial or residential. Understand, though, you have the ability to ultimately have up to, I think it's 11 years, maybe more, up to 11 years to finish a project if you meet those criteria. So there is ample time to get a project done.
Thank you, that answers the question. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to adopt ordinance amending the Union County Water and Sewer Extension Ordinance in Article 4 of Chapter 34 of the Union County Code.
Okay, have a motion, any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Thank you, honey. Next, we have the Union County Property Tax Reappraisal Update and Resolution for 4-year appraisal cycle. You thought you'd never get the opportunity to tell us, did you?
I'm not going to say this is one of those scenarios where you save the best for last, but here we are. Let's see. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Board of Commissioners. I appreciate your time this evening. We will do our best to keep this very quick. We've got just an update for you on our 2021 reappraisal, kind of where we went, the process we went through and what the outcome of that was, and also a resolution regarding advancing the next reappraisal cycle to a 4-year cycle as opposed to the statutory 8-year.
Just to update on some of the big numbers from the 2021 reappraisal. We are now up to, this number has changed as of yesterday. I got an update. We're now up to 104,000 parcels, just over 104,000 parcels in Union County, which is a significant change from when I came here 17 years ago. The number of appeals this year was significantly lower than expected. I mean, we had a lot of sticker shock. We had a lot of phone calls. Staff did a tremendous job of working through that scenario with taxpayers, which I think staved off a lot of appeals. We would have expected a 10% appeal rate in a reval year, especially with the kind of overall increases we saw in the county. But we ended up with a 4.2% appeal rate, which is just over 4,400 appeals. I mean, that's about as good as you can get in a very hot real estate market with a revaluation cycle. The value reductions to date, we have reduced, between our office and the Board of Equalization and Review, have reduced the values assessed by $263 million based on appeals. Of those 4,453 appeals, only 464 of those went on to appeal to the Board of Equalization and Review. The staff has done a tremendous job of working with taxpayers and coming to an agreeable value for the property. From that appeals level, we have had 6 currently appealed to the Property Tax Commission. That 464, we are still meeting with the board. We have about 100 or so appeals left for them to adjudicate and meet with taxpayers on, so that PTC number could grow a little bit. This kind of shows you the track that we're on. I started tracking this number back in January. As you know, the trigger mechanism for a state mandated reappraisal is the sales ratio. That is the sole statistic that they look at. In January, when the new values went into effect, we were at a 99.86% sales assessment ratio. And that's as good as you can get. Otherwise, the state would come in and look at it and say, hey, you're just chasing sales and changing values based on sale numbers, but that's not what we do. By the end of January, you can see that number had already dropped to 93%. It just shows you where the current market is. This trend line goes down through the end of June, where our ratio was at 83.95%. As you know, we had a lot of discussions the last couple of years where the state trigger point is 85%. We're already below that based on our internal study. We have not, the state wouldn't give us that official number until sometime early next year before we get there. But the trends are that we will trigger after 1 year of a reappraisal cycle, which, talking to the property tax director and the Department of Revenue, who actually used to work appeals at the state level for Union County and has family in the county, he said he's never seen anything like this. And we're not the only county that's seeing this. I talked to a colleague in a significantly smaller county up outside of Winston-Salem last week, and his had dropped between 10 and 12%. And he's not in the same area that we are. So it's a phenomenon that's happening across the state, it's reflective of the national market. We look at an index called the Case-Shiller National Index, and year over year in June, they had seen a 17% increase in home values and sale prices over last year. So we're just following, the county is following right in line with the national real estate market. As to future reappraisals, we have this issue of optional versus mandatory advancement. From 2004 and 2008, the county, and actually 2000, the county did a 4-year reappraisal cycle. They took action to advance those reappraisal cycles. We got off cycle with the economic challenges that occurred in 2009, 2010. Ended up on a 7-year cycle and did a reappraisal in 2015. We didn't take action to do a 2019 reappraisal and ultimately triggered that again with a mandatory advancement. What we're asking tonight is that you consider adopting a resolution taking that step for Union County. It leads to a standardization of processes. It's a consistent action with peer counties. If you look at counties our size across the state and larger, there's not a single county that's not on a 4-year reappraisal cycle. What we need is the adoption of the resolution. And we think that the intent of this would be to avoid something like a 30+% increase in 4 years. We don't have a crystal ball. We can't say where the market's going to be at that point. Obviously, you just saw the previous slide. We're at 17% at this point, roughly, below what market is indicating the values are. but we want to prepare to move forward with a 4-year cycle moving permanently for Union County, regardless of the market being up and down, because that way it goes both ways. And we stay within that reasonable market range every 4 years, and taxpayers can come to expect that. That is the end of my presentation. You also have a resolution in your packet that goes into some budget items related to the reappraisal cycle. By statute, the county is required to set up a fund, a reappraisal fund. It's more relevant in counties that contract out reappraisals. We do ours solely in-house with the work of some consultants. But we have those peaks in budget requests every reappraisal year with printing cost, mailing cost, appeals cost, legal fees, those type of things. And this would standardize some of that budget process where it can be funded in small bites on a regular basis as part of this resolution. And we'd ask that you consider that tonight.
Commissioner Rick?
Van, am I correct in understanding that we've already hit one trigger by sales that would require us to do another reval?
The indications at this point is yes. The state looks at the year-end sales ratio. It would take a major correction or adjustment in the market to get back above 85% by the end of this year for it not to hit that trigger point, in my opinion. Which, if and when that happens, that still puts us on a 4-year cycle because you have 3 years to complete the next reappraisal.
Right.
After that process. So either way, whether you adopt this resolution or the trigger mechanism, we would prefer this because it gives us more stability moving forward. Either way, it's going to be a 2025 reappraisal is what we're looking at.
Well, I was talking to Commissioner Simpson last week, and one thing he said that, and I would tell this to all the potential candidates, he said once you get in the seat, you find out 5% of your choice is political, and 95% is statutory and state mandated.
That's correct.
And I know back last year I was saying we've hit a lot of mileposts for you, and he said somewhere down the road we probably need to look at 4-year revaluations so we don't have the sticker shock that we had this time. With that being said, I'll make a motion to adopt a resolution advancing the 2029 Occidental reappraisal to be completed effective January 1st, 2025, and establish an ongoing 4-year reappraisal cycle.
Okay, we have a motion. Any further discussion? Commissioner Rushing?
Dennis, you said that in a like a sad thing, but I think it's a great thing.
Do what?
You said it like a sad thing, but I think it's a great thing that we're doing it every 4 years. This is something that's going to help educate the people of the county as to how this process works. And if we'll keep it on that 4-year cycle, if people that now think that they're at that high and that we're going to come off of it, then that means that their values will go down in 4 years. If that high goes even higher, as long as the tax rate comes down to meet that, then they're still benefiting. They're paying lower taxes on their cars. But again, we as a board have to be able to bring those rates down. We got to communicate this to the towns that very few towns went revenue neutral this time, and a lot of them stayed at their current rate, which is going to be a massive hit on the taxpayers when they get their town tax bill. It's going to be a huge hit for some people. I had a gentleman called me just the other day and said that he was in communication with your office, and he said that a house that he had, I think, was at $625,000, and he said the prior value was much lower than that. And in talking to him, I asked him, well, you know, he told me how much it cost, that he had just bought it in a prior year, and it was $625,000. I said, well, that's the value of it, and that's how they came. But he was told by somebody in your office that they didn't go by the sales price of the house. Is that correct or not correct? Or?
Yes and no. So if a house sells, we don't just go grab that value and put it on as new value for reappraisal. That sale is considered with the whole pool of sales in the county.
Right. So if a dad sold a house to a daughter for half the value, you wouldn't give it that value.
No.
Yeah, I got that. But so it is used and considered in comparison with the value of the house. I mean, that's the value of the house and the comparables.
That's correct.
Okay, I got you. So we just wouldn't normally go the other way. But no, this is, if we could afford to do them every year, I'd do them every year after this last one. Because people really think we targeted a COVID year, but this was started 3 years before COVID.
The wheels for this reappraisal started in 2018.
Yeah, so we started this in 2018, and it just completed. None of us even knew, maybe me and Jerry had heard of COVID before, something like that out of China, but this is something that we didn't know was even coming. We don't know what's going to happen in 3 more years.
That's correct.
But again, I've got a home rental property in another county that is worth the same thing that I paid for it 30 years ago. And I paid taxes on it every year, and trust me, it's lost money compared to the house here in Union County. But it is not a bad thing. If you wouldn't have made the motion, I would have made the motion, because this is something that's going to help people understand. But what we do have to get as our elected officials in the municipalities to understand, this doesn't mean that you won the lottery, that you need to help your citizens by lowering your tax rate. That's the only way everybody benefits. Your economic development through your commercial properties benefit. Everybody benefits. The city of Monroe went revenue neutral. I applaud them for doing that for their businesses and for their residents and their taxpayers. They did a great thing. The county went 1 penny over revenue neutral, which is much better than keeping the 73.09 cent and the high values, which would have been devastating to families across Union County. So we know, we just been through the process. As people are getting their tax bills in these towns, they're going to start understanding more. And as people get their county tax bills, they're going to understand this more of what happens. And we have to be diligent in making sure that we do the right thing and lowering that tax rate if the values go higher. If the values go lower, then the tax rate goes up, but you still might not be paying more in taxes. And people need to understand that. In 2014 or 15, when we did that one, we cut like a half a penny off of it, so the tax rate went up by a penny and a half, I believe, but it should have gone up by 2 pennies to be revenue neutral. So there are ways and that this all works out, but no, this is a good way of educating people how this works. And in 2008, when one was done and we waited so long, it never hit the trigger until a certain time. But people's values dropped tremendously in 2009, 2010. They started dropping like crazy, but that rate was still there. And so it's bad the other way too. So this accurate appraisal and as accurate as we can be on these things, and as close together as we can do them, this is going to be an education, it's going to be a learning opportunity for the people of the county to see how this all works, and it could be to your benefit and should be to your benefit. If the economic development in the county is going so great, you should see a lower tax rate. And no, I'm completely supportive of the motion, and it's a good thing for the county.
Only thing I'll say is, Van, you and your staff did an outstanding job saying that you did the reappraisal process yourself, and we appreciate what you do on an ongoing basis.
Thank you.
And so we have a motion. All in favor? Aye. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Next item is appointments to boards and committees. Planning Board, 1 vacancy for an unexpired term of a regular member on the Planning Board, which has been advertised in accordance with the board's rules of procedure. This term applies on April 19th, 2022. We have had 2 applicants, one a Robert McNally, who currently serves as an alternate on the Planning Board. Mr. McNally is requesting to move from an alternate member to fill the regular member vacant position. Also, a Pamela Dutta also has applied. And we'll take these one at a time, and I'll make a motion that we accept Mr. McNally to be added to the Planning Board. Any discussion? All in favor? Hold on. Go ahead.
And this is to replace the seat from Everett Medlin passing away.
Yes.
And I just want to say Everett Medlin was a good man and a good planning board member. We sent a man up there to the planning board that had spent some time in New York, and he related a story that Everett came up to him, and after the first meeting or so, and he said, "You know, you're nothing like I expected." And Everett was just that kind of guy. He was a Superman. I attended church with him years ago, and always friendly, always helpful. And again, we lost a very valuable member of this community in Everett Middle.
Okay, we have a motion to approve Robert McNally. All in favor? Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
would it be appropriate to, since we just moved him from alternate to planning board, to nominate that lady for alternate, or do we need to go through the
I think we
process?
have to go through the process, don't we, Lynn?
Okay,
Okay.
just trying to kill two birds.
All right.
I would say you certainly could if you wish to. There is nothing prohibiting you from doing that. Now, that's up to you. If you want to advertise for that, you can. But I don't think there's anything that prohibits you if you wish to.
My question is, is that something she wants to do? I don't know that.
I don't know the answer to that.
I spoke with Ms. Duda on the phone, and I believe she would be okay in the position.
Okay.
Is that a yes or a no?
It is a yes. It is a yes.
Then you make an amendment to the motion to add Ms. Dodo
Yes,
as an alternative. Huh? Hollis?
go ahead. I don't remember her name.
I'll make a motion to put Robert McNally on as a permanent member of the planning board and add Ms. Duda as an alternate. Okay? Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Okay. Next, we have the Union County Home and Community Care Block Grant Advisory Committee. There's at least 3 vacancies on the Union County Home and Community Care Block Grant Advisory Committee, which has been advertised in accordance with the rules. An application has been received from Tracy Henry to serve on this committee. Make a motion to appoint Tracy Henry to the Union County Home and Community Care Block Grant Advisory Committee. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Next, we have the Consolidated Human Services Board. There are 4 vacancies for Consumers of Human Services and Consolidated Human Service Board. These vacancies have been advertised in accordance with the board rules of procedure. An application has been received from Earl Ford. Mr. Ford's application was received during the Consolidation Human Services Board meeting on Monday, August 9th. And Mr. Ford has been recommended by the board to appoint to fill one of the Consumer Human Services positions. And I highly recommend, make the motion that we accept Mr. Ford. He is a retired member of the Department of Human Services and an outstanding gentleman. So, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Next, we have Deputy County Manager's comments.
Just briefly, I would like to thank the staff and the board for, we had a pretty hefty agenda tonight, and you've been engaged since 5 o'clock, and I appreciate the feedback and direction that you gave. I think staff does as well, and appreciate the work they've done. And with that, I'll say good night.
Commissioner Simpson.
No further comment.
Commissioner Rushing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to apologize for missing last week's work session. Had a little health issue going on, but I appreciate the board's concerns and reaching out to me. And I appreciate the things that we've done tonight. We've done a lot of great things. People don't understand this type of meeting, you get more accomplished. And we had a wonderful meeting tonight, got a lot of good things for the future of this county, and I'm proud of that. Thank you.
Commissioner Williams.
No comments, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Ray.
I would like to reiterate, Lee, great job, and Archie and Julie and Jonathan, Chairman of the Planning Board. So, great job there. I commend my fellow board members. We plowed a lot of ground tonight, and we didn't leave no clots. We left it smooth and ready to plant.
I don't know how to follow that, Dennis. I want to also commend our 2050 committee for an outstanding job that they did, and we look forward to further discussion. So with that, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you.
Jerry, I don't know if I